G'day, in this video we're talking about biochar and how we can use biochar to build soil organic carbon and what role it has to play in our farming systems. My name is Till Simmons. I run Agresol, which is a regenerative agriculture consulting business, of which we produce this channel, Agriculture Explained, as a way to get some information out there. This video is a part of our soil organic carbon series, so go check out the other videos. This is the 6th video in the series, so we have a whole range of different videos to tell you all about soil organic carbon and how to build soil organic carbon on your farm. Finally, if you're a farmer in Australia and you're looking to use some of the techniques we're talking about today and in our other videos, make sure to sign up for a free 30-minute consultation with us to start regenerating your farm. So biochar in itself is a bit of a buzzword. Effectively, what we're talking about is charcoal, but not just charcoal. It's a special charcoal that has been produced under a low oxygen environment. And so what happens is we get biomass, and ideally you want a high carbon component or high carbon to nitrogen ratio in this biomass. So we're thinking like logs, wood chips, that kind of thing. We're going to burn that in an environment that has limited oxygen. And so what this allows is a incomplete burn of the material, leaving behind as much charcoal as possible. If you had too much of a hot burn, a lot more of that carbon is released as carbon dioxide. In this, we want as little oxygen as possible, so it burns everything but the carbon. So this process is called pyrolysis, and it produces effectively charcoal. But when you have it in an oxygen limited environment, it increases the conversion of carbon into charcoal. Now, I wouldn't quite define this as biochar. There's a few extra steps that is required to produce what I would call biochar or activated biochar. But before we get into that, this process of going from biomass to our charcoal has a carbon conversion efficiency, or the ability for a carbon at the start, so over here, biomass to end up over here and be stored in our soil, of about 41.4%. Now, that's the average of multiple different experiments. The range of that was 25 to 50. So depending on your feedstock or what you put into effectively the fire, what you burn, will depend on the conversion of that carbon. So again, you want to have a high amount of carbon in your feedstock, or like more wood material rather than a softer material or green. So what this means is that in any piece of biomass, you're effectively going to reduce that number to 41% of what was originally there as biomass or as biochar. And so in order to get biochar itself, you need to take this coal that we produce, or charcoal that we produced in this process, and we want to add 3 things. We need to add water to rehydrate the charcoal. We want to add minerals, and we also want to add microbes. And so all of that will activate our charcoal into biochar. And that's very important. It's not just adding charcoal to the soil, it's adding all these things, so the water, minerals, and microbes, to allow our plants, effectively to give our plants nutrition and microbes. Now, biochar and charcoal itself is a very interesting material. It has a very porous structure, allowing these microbes and the minerals to colonize into that structure. So it makes a really good medium for inoculation if you're going to spread that onto your paddock. Now, there's a whole range of different other benefits from biochar and charcoal. The first one is that it has a relatively high cation exchange capacity, not like humus. Humus is a bit higher, but it has a CEC ranging of 5 to 200 centimoles a kilo. Depending on the method that you use, your methodology in terms of burning, so the temperature and the time and your feedstock will change your CEC. And this is actually problematic. So the method that you use to produce biochar significantly changes the outcome of the features of your biochar. So it's very important to do a bit of research into how do you maximize your biochar production and to ensure you get the characteristics that you actually want. A few studies suggest that biochar increases aggregation as well as structure, the porous structure of biochar and the active sites around it, increase water holding capacity, and biochar tends to sit at a pH of around 8, which means if you're adding it to most agricultural soils, which tend to be acidic, it will increase the pH of the soil, making it more a favourable environment for your plants. And there's a few big limitations in terms of biochar. The first one is that on a few studies I found that actually can decrease microbial activity. So specifically in terms of the decomposers. So what was shown was that it increased microbes that had a low carbon mineralization rate, so less decomposers effectively in the soil. And I'd assume that because you're adding effectively inert material that microbes can't feed upon, that there's a potential for you to starve your microbes. There's also with ultra high applications of 20 tonnes per hectare, fungal populations also decrease that were decomposers. Now there could be potentially an effect with the pH. So if you're adding too high of a pH, microbes don't like ultra high pHs. So that could be potentially damaging. And the study may have also tilled or ploughed in that biochar. So that in itself would have had an effect. So there's a potential risk there, but also if you're adding microbes, it might, sort itself out. The biggest negative of biochar production is that it's costly. So it's very expensive to produce and to spread and to get all the materials. And it's not quite sustainable. We'll get into that in a bit. But effectively, you're just taking material from here and you're putting it onto your paddocks. And so if that material was waste anyways, and it was waste, there's no problem with adding it to your paddocks. The problem is if you're chopping down trees to then put on your paddocks, then that's a bit of a problem. And so what I've done is a quick calculation as to what would we need to apply to increase our soil organic carbon by 1% in the top 30 centimetres of soil. And so top 30 centimetres is basically our topsoil. Maybe it starts to get into a bit of a subsoil, but the rooting zone is, say, about 30 centimetres. 1% increase in our SOC is a good bit to aim for. And so the amount of soil in that area is about 4,200 tonnes of soil itself. Biochar is about 80% carbon, which means we would need to apply 52 tonnes of biochar itself per hectare in order to increase it by 1%. So if we were to think about this as buying in biochar costs about $1,250 per tonne, which means for a hectare to increase it to 1%, you're going to need about $65,000, which is pretty expensive. And so because of just that, it's financially impossible to try and increase your soil organic carbon using biochar. And we'll get into the discussion about the purposes of biochar and how it can be used. But in terms of trying to increase soil organic carbon on scale, it's effectively impossible. Now, if we were to produce it by ourselves, ignoring all the time and effort, it would require about 125 tonnes of wood. And if you assumed a tree's 5 tonnes, it's going to require about 25 trees, like large trees, to produce the amount of wood to then put back into your paddocks to increase your soil organic carbon. So 25 trees is about one tree every 20 metres, so 20 metres by 20 metres. It's a lot of trees, a lot of area. There's a lot of effort to basically get not a massive increase in your soil organic carbon. It might be different if it was a 10% increase, but a 1% increase in only the top 30 centimetres, it doesn't really make sense to use biochar as a way to increase soil organic carbon. Now, saying that, there are benefits to biochar, and it's great. I'm saying lots of different comparisons between using biochar and not using biochar, but the role of biochar is this part here. It's as a medium for adding minerals and microbes to our soil. And so the best way to do that, if you do produce your own biochar, put it in a tank that's cycling around, add your minerals, everything from NPK as well as all your trace minerals. It's going to hold that, reduce your leaching, and then add your microbes and your biostimulants and everything you need, and then you can spread it out across your paddock. And so because of the porosity of biochar, it can hold onto those minerals and those microbes a lot better than just spraying it out. And it should also protect our microbes from potentially being killed when exposed directly to UV or harsh conditions. And so if I was to use biochar or recommend it in our consultation, it would be more so as a means to supply minerals and microbes to your paddock. And then the question is, well, do you buy it? Is the cost of buying it worth the potential benefit versus just applying it as a foliar spray? I would probably go on the side of it's not. And a lot of studies that are showing this benefit is applying biochar at rates of around 20 tonnes a hectare, which is, getting comparable to that. So agronomically, you can't quite get that much biochar to get these benefits. And really, it's a means of applying minerals and microbes to your paddocks. Now, there is a potential to kind of use this idea with burning. So fire stick farming, what the Australian Aboriginals used to do, and then even in northern Queensland, what a lot of farmers up there do. So in terms of you burn your paddock, you produce your effectively biochar, hopefully under a cool burn. That produces charcoal on the top, and then maybe if you run some cattle over, you can inoculate it with your microbes and minerals, and then that's a bit of a cycle. And so this idea has been found in the Amazon rainforest with the terra soil there. It is highly fertile, but it requires a lot of wood to get there. And so if you're on a hobby farm and you have a fireplace or something and you're using those ashes on your veggie garden, that's great. But if we're talking about a 1,000 hectare farm, it's impossible to apply that much biochar onto your paddocks. But what we'll do in some future videos is we're going to compare biochar, so biochar itself, to say compost as a decomposition pathway, and then cover crops as the humidification pathway, and see what is best, as well as using a combination of all of these to determine what we can do as farmers to increase our soil organic carbon without blowing the bank, and being more sustainable and cutting down a bunch of trees. Awesome. Well, if you like that, let me know. Biochar tends to have a cult following, so please don't be too mean in the comments. Otherwise, I'd love to hear some other thoughts around this. Again, not against it. It's just one of those tools in a tool belt. Just depends what you want to use it for. Awesome. Well, thanks again for watching. Make sure to check out the previous videos in the Soil Organic Carbon course, as well as subscribe so you can see the future videos. My name is Till Simmons from Agresol. Cheers.